If not us, then who? If not now, then when? So just get after it. If you have the intuition, if you have the right experience, you have the right people around you, just get started. When you feel better, everyone in your life feels better as well, right? So that energy continues rippling out into the world. So I really take that responsibility very, very seriously. Every day I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to grow this global brand that has the ability to change people's lives.
In today's world, how does a brand break through the noise and become iconic? Join me, Jason Harris, as I speak with the world's leading marketing experts about how they use soul and science to build an iconic brand. Think of it as EQ meeting IQ. So let's lock in and together fast forward our marketing minds on the Soul and Science podcast. Welcome to another Soul and Science podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Sara Brooks, Chief Growth Officer at BetterHelp, the world's largest online therapy platform. Sara has 2 decades of marketing leadership, including pivotal roles at Facebook/Meta, the RealReal, and beyond. She now leads BetterHelp's global mission to make mental health care more accessible and more empathetic at scale. In this episode, we will explore the soul and science of scaling empathy. How does one do that? How does a brand do that? And how do you grow a brand rooted in human connection without losing the heart that makes this brand stand out? Welcome to the podcast, Sara Brooks.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. All right, Sara, let's rewind before we get into BetterHelp and talk about your marketing journey and your career and how you got started in the marketing world. Did you know you always wanted to go into marketing? Was that something that was kind of innately inside you, or did you get a job that you discovered it? How did that happen?
As you mentioned, I've been at this hustle for a while, over 20 years. But it started as a curious kid in a rural community. I grew up in a really small town in Delaware, and I was always really curious about people, about places, about cultures. And so even though I didn't start my first job in marketing, I would say that it was innate in me this whole time. If you think about marketers and what connects us, it is this insights-driven, really trying to understand what fuels people, what drives them to purchase the things that they do, to use the services that they do. And I would say that innate curiosity has been in me the whole time.
And what was your first marketing job?
First marketing job was actually when I worked at Facebook. So it was early days at Facebook. I'd done other program management type of roles where I worked closely with marketers. But here I was really helping people to grow using the Facebook platform. So intersection of sales, marketing, and product. And it was an awesome ride.
That's great. From Facebook, what was your next gig?
Next one, I had been operating at scale at Facebook. I was there early days. And so I had been teaching other companies how to use Facebook to grow. And I got thirsty to actually go into a company and do it myself. And so I went to a small startup called The Hunt. It was Series A. We were 10 people. I was the first business hire. And so I did a variety of things, one of those being marketing. We scaled that, grew the company, grew the user base, business model, and ultimately that was sold to Pinterest.
Nice. And then you went to the RealReal.
I did.
Yep.
Another hypergrowth story. So when I started at the RealReal, we were one office sitting in the Bayview in San Francisco, for those who know San Francisco, a little bit of a sketchy neighborhood at that time. We were above the warehouse. So our headquarters was a small group of people who were helping to grow and scale this online consignment company. And, was there for almost 8 years. And again, another private to public scale hypergrowth.
Yeah, I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
And then was the next stint here at BetterHelp, or there was something in between that, right?
Yeah, I took a little time to do some fractional CMO roles. I got hungry to go back to building. I love building and scaling companies. So did a couple of gigs like that. I helped to grow Yardzen, which is another marketplace. And then from there, went on to BetterHelp. Ultimately loved those early days, but was looking for just a bit more scale.
And what attracted you to the BetterHelp opportunity?
So through line of my career is this disruptive consumer growth company, right? So how do you take a marketplace? How do you make it easier, more accessible, more affordable online? And so also through line for me is mission driven companies. So the RealReal, although it's fashion, it's really about sustainability. And so that fueled me. The opportunity to get to work at the largest online therapy platform at a time where so many people are in need of mental health support and mental health is zeitgeist was just one that I couldn't pass up. And the people ultimately drew me to make this decision.
That's awesome. With that, sort of curiosity, the kind of purpose driven through line, what do you think you're particularly skilled at or particularly good at?
I'm really good at connecting the dots.
Okay.
So whether this is figuring out the right people, the right team to get on a project, whether this is connecting macro trends and bringing them down to micro and driving business outcomes, whether this is like a really quick reframe on, something that might not be going well, but seeing, hey, here's how we can connect the dots and do this marketing reframe. I think that's something that makes me quite unique.
Love that. It's interesting because you're leading this company that's built on empathy, but it's online therapy. There's a lot of algorithms and recommendation engines that happen. How do you kind of balance with BetterHelp? I guess Soul and Science, name of the podcast. How do you balance that idea of connecting, keeping empathy for the consumer, but balancing that with like data and numbers and the science part of the company?
Yeah, I love the name of the podcast. I always say the art and science and balancing that in marketing. We're a really data-driven marketing team at BetterHelp. So we understand, where should we spend our next best dollar to increase access to people? We're really sophisticated from a measurement standpoint. And BetterHelp, as you mentioned, also very data-driven. We believe that the right therapist can change everything. And so we map all of our algorithms and over 10 years of data to match people with the right therapist. And so it is quite data driven at the end of the day. That said, I think as a marketer, you want to use that data to pull out insights to then build stories that have this emotional connection, right? So the data tells us who should we be talking to and maybe in which channel should we be talking to them. But we really get to decide heart, empathy. What are the things that we're saying? How do we best say it that's going to connect with people and really move them?
And how do you think about scale when you think about the company? Because I know you're on a mission. Your purpose is very clear. This idea of, you're already the world's largest online therapy platform, but the idea of creating accessibility to therapy and empathy at scale. How do you think of growth, but also keeping the quality high?
Yeah, absolutely. So our provider network is the heart of everything we do, right? So how do we make sure that we have the right providers who are clinically vetted, who can drive these life-changing outcomes? And then how do we keep the data at the heart of this so that we make sure that those outcomes are being driven, that it's that same quality bar. When it comes to marketing and stories that we tell, I think a lot about how do you take these stories that we're so fortunate to get to hear every day from providers, from members, and how do you scale that? So we're on a podcast. I'd love to talk about our podcast that we published this year called Mind If We Talk. It's award winning. We just found out that we won 2 awards from Signal
Oh yeah,
today.
we won 2 awards from Signal.
Yeah,
Awesome.
congrats.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
great. Yeah.
So this, I think, really embodies how we think about storytelling at BetterHelp. So we took this podcast, it's 2 parts, culturally relevant. So we have some podcasters and other content creators who have joined us as guests on our podcast to talk about topics that we found people want to hear more about as it relates to mental health. So we did this in a very data-driven way. What are people searching for? What are they talking about? What could we help to demystify in the therapy process? So an example, how to combat loneliness. There are so many people who are feeling really disconnected in the world that we live in today. And so we had a special guest on who worked with our head of clinical, Jesus, and they had this deep conversation about loneliness and what this content creator had been experiencing. And it really feels like a mini therapy session. So that's part one, very culturally relevant. And then we take it to the clinical expertise. So then we have our head of clinical speaking with another clinician at BetterHelp, really talking about those themes that they heard in the episode and tying that back to the clinical element. And I think that it's a really nice format for storytelling and shows a lot about how we think about scaling those stories. Again, finding stories that are going to resonate with a lot of people and finding the right spokesperson to really be able to share their authentic story, be a bit vulnerable in that, and then connect it, of course, to the science.
So I love that. It's sort of like a flywheel that you've created where you know what people are searching for and curious about. You cover that on the podcast, and then you kind of have from what was discussed on the podcast sort of an outcome after that, and then you kind of continue that in your format. I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Is that podcast part of the way you're going to scale that empathy? Is it just getting more therapists and more people on the platform? Is it educational? Is it white papers? Is it like what other elements around that do you guys see as part of building the brand and building that empathy at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we have the most content as it relates to mental health of anyone on the planet. And again, it's really rooted in that clinical expertise. So how do we take an opportunity like a podcast, telling those stories between clinician and patient, again, in a privacy safe way? And how do we get that out into the world so that even if you're not thinking about therapy today or you're not in need of therapy today, the moment that you could benefit from therapy, you think about BetterHelp, right? Because you've seen all of these resources. You've heard us talking about this. You've heard the normalization that we're out there, every day doing in the world. And so that's how I think about scaling this ultimately. It's content driven. Of course, we want to make sure that our platform is available for everyone as they need it. But using our platform is not the only way that you can be interested or learning more about mental health.
I've used the platform.
Yeah.
I had a good experience. Yeah,
I love to hear that.
it was great. What's the hardest part of your job? Because your, business is going well, you've got scale. What part are you like, oh, this is really hard to accomplish?
One thing that keeps me up at night is just access. How do we increase access to mental health care? And there's a few things that get in the way for people. The first thing is stigma. So even though, and we published this great state of stigma report this year in May for Mental Health Awareness Month, what I found was really interesting in this report. 3 out of 4 people say collectively, yeah, yes, it's a good idea to seek therapy for your mental health. But when you take it down to an individual level, 6 out of 10 people said that they fear asking for support for fear of being judged. And so it's this dichotomy of, collectively we think this is okay and we agree, but it's almost like if it's for someone else. But when it comes down to being for yourself, we're still afraid to ask for support when we need it. So I really do think a lot about this awesome responsibility that I have leading this big global brand. And how do we continue to push forward on this destigmatization of therapy in support of mental health? And again, so many people who are in need of this and who go untreated. 1 billion people at any given time who are experiencing stress, anxiety, and most of those people go untreated.
Can you share a moment during a campaign where maybe you learned something or you got feedback that your message didn't land either emotionally or culturally and you had to pivot? Or maybe that hasn't happened yet in your campaigns?
Oh,
But
that happens. Yeah,
okay,
that
yeah.
happens. Look, we're building a global brand. So it needs to be globally relevant, but it also needs to be appropriate in the markets where we're launching. So, for example, we just launched in France and Germany this year. And so as I'm building these global campaigns, everything that we're thinking through from the location, the set location, the casting, the situation, the script, all needs to be with that like localized consideration in mind. So a recent one, this is a television commercial that we're running now that you can see. It takes place in a coffee shop. And as we were thinking about what is the protagonist, the main character in this, what's he going to order at the coffee shop? We had to think about sort of these like cultural nuances. In the beginning, I think we had him ordering, oh, I don't remember, but we had him ordering something, a beverage that wasn't appropriate uh, across the globe, right? And so we had to take that back. It was a latte or something, right? And so we had to take it back and say, oh, actually, that didn't resonate as we ran this in France and in Germany. We need to change the coffee that who was ordering. That's a small example, easy pivot. But I would say one of the things as we're producing these campaigns, we're really thoughtful about how are we going to take this and then localize it. So for example, what's the voice to camera? Is there an opportunity for us, as we know we're going to dump this, to actually have that so it's not so direct voice to camera and it's a different shot so that we can make sure that the voiceover is going to make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to think about there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a really
It's
good.
fun. It makes it really challenging.
Yeah, it's a good example because you might see a script and you just think, okay, in the U.S. that'll play
Sure.
great,
Yeah.
but you have to really put it through that filter. What kind of success metrics do you look at? Maybe there's ad campaign metrics like clicks, signups, I don't know, website visits, and then which ones are more important, or are they all important? And then maybe they're important for different campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a branding perspective, we measure all of the traditional brand KPIs that you would expect: awareness, consideration. And one of the things that I'm proud that we brought to the forefront this year is affinity. So this really ties back to that empathy. How are people feeling about the brand? So they've heard of us, of course. They probably have considered us. What about how do they feel about this brand? What's their connection to it? And so to get at affinity, we look at everything that people are saying about us across the internet. And we combine all of that into these key feelings and emotions that we want people to have about the brand. And then we score them, right? So emotions that pull people towards the brand or maybe push them away. And then we have a monthly measurement of what is this brand affinity and how's it moving over time. We can tie that back to particular campaigns. So as I mentioned, very data driven company, and all the hard business KPIs, I'm sure what everybody else looks at as well, traffic and conversion and new trials and so on. But I'm particularly proud of how we take that same analytical rigor and apply it to something more soulful that can typically be a bit harder to measure.
You use a lot of influencers. You do a lot of podcast sponsorships. I think that really plays into what you found as effective in marketing, which is the most effective way to market is having someone having a good experience and recommending the brand. And that probably ties into a lot of where you spend your dollars on, like influencers recommending the brand, et cetera. I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about authentic voices telling their stories, right? So therapy is zeitgeist, mental health is zeitgeist. And so how do we make sure that we have people who this feels brand relevant for them, right? They've spoken about their own experiences. How do we use them not as spokespeople, but really as an opportunity for us to get our brand message through because it is so relevant to the conversations that they're already having. So to that extent, podcasts, content creators, athletes, entertainers, those all make a lot of sense for our brand.
I love that. So speaking of athletes, the Stop the Madness campaign, you had stories and voices from athletes there. How do you how do you go through kind of vetting the partners that are right for the brand to keep it authentic?
Yeah. So Stop the Madness was a campaign that follows that formula that I mentioned. Data, we pulled an insight, and then we told some emotional stories. So the data that we found was that 1 in 3 college athletes are experiencing online hate. And those are from people with sports betting interests.
That's crazy high.
Isn't
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
so high. And these are, they're college athletes. These are teenagers in a lot of cases, right? And so then we dug a little deeper and we found that for female athletes, it's 3 times worse. And so we said, okay, got it. We've got to do something. NCAA tournaments coming up. Women's hoops is, of course, just huge in terms of its scale and its growth from a fan base perspective. And that means, one, we have a lot of people who want to hear these stories. And two, these athletes are going to experience even more of this online vitriol, and we need to be there to support them, right? So found this data, found these insights, and then started telling these stories. We partnered with Kiki Rice in particular, who has been very vocal about her own experience with mental health and as it relates to performance, as it relates to being put into the spotlight on social media and other platforms as she's playing for UCLA, right? And so she had done an ESPN documentary that sort of chronicled the 23 and 24 year for her. And so we reached out to her to tell her about the campaign and to see if she would be interested. And again, because it's so authentic to what she's experiencing, the campaign went off incredibly well. And she was an obvious voice for us to use to help to tell how therapy can be a great support for you as you're going through these moments in your life.
How do you avoid sort of, everyone has their own personal journey they're dealing with. How do you market it that way without like oversimplifying it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you don't want to trivialize it, right?
Yeah.
People are going
Yeah.
through some real serious, moments in their life. And so we want to be there and be supportive, but we also don't want to trivialize this. We also don't, in some ways, want to make it overly serious, right? Because to your point, people will need therapy at different points in time in their life, right? And so what we want to do as a brand is show up in a way, showing these authentic stories that will resonate with you at one moment or another and say, hey, maybe I felt that before as I'm in a high stress situation where I need to perform. I felt that way before. I might feel that way again. When I feel that way again, maybe therapy is a good solution for me. When you're in the moment and you really need support, we want to be empathetic. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to get started. Again, matching you with somebody very quickly so you can get that support you need. So from a tone perspective, it is a bit challenging. And we are playing a bit more with humor because I think, right, like it can be so serious and it can be something that, we can take to an extreme, and we want to sort of lighten it, right? This is something that so many people experience and can use support with. And so we're playing a little bit with humor recently.
I've noticed that too. And I think that's smart because I think it goes back into your overall goal of accessibility.
Right.
That I think allows it to be feel more accessible and that it's for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that.
Exactly. While also respecting if you're in a time of need, we want to be there to support you right away and not make light of that.
Right. Of course. Yeah. That's tough in your role to sort of balance that.
Absolutely.
Is there a recent creative campaign that surprised you in how people responded? Something that just maybe hit a nerve and you were like, oh, we really found something here.
Yeah. Our campaign with Lewis Capaldi, are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Big star in the UK, showed us that vulnerability isn't a risk. It's the whole point. So this campaign, Lewis Capaldi had a panic attack almost just over 2 years ago on stage at Glastonbury, big public forum, and had a panic attack, went out of the public eye for 2 years to focus on his mental health. He came back to Glastonbury, had this big comeback moment, and 1 week later announced his partnership with BetterHelp, where together we're donating 734,000 hours of therapy. That represents 1,000 hours for every day that he was out of the public eye working on his mental health to his fans, right? And so we knew that Lewis's story is one that is so authentic to him, right? This is a big comeback story. He told it in a beautiful way. We really didn't do a lot from a marketing perspective. We did a documentary style video where he really talked about mental health. He talked about therapy. It was very vulnerable. It was very authentic. We didn't put a lot of bells and whistles on it. We didn't put a lot of other marketing spin. We let it be very raw. And so we knew that that would probably play pretty well with his fans. But what's really surprising is just how far and wide that spread, and the real positive sentiment. Not only people rooting for Lewis and saying, we're so glad that he's back. We love your music. We're so proud of your comeback story. but them seeing themselves in his story and saying, I am going to give therapy a try. I am going to use one of these 734,000 hours of free therapy because I believe in myself and I believe that I can have my own comeback story. It's been really such a beautiful campaign.
That's such a great story. And he performed at Glastonbury this
He
last round,
did.
like in the summer,
Just
right?
this last round, exactly. He's
Yeah,
got a
that's
new
awesome.
album. He's on tour. It's really amazing to see.
Have you had like a influential mentor or leader or someone that helped shape you in your career?
I love this question and I love to mentor people. So I have a lot of mentees that I work with. Happy to be part of the First Round Capital mentorship program formally and a few others. For me personally, I look for advice from a trusted group of advisors. So it's a lot to ask one person to be your mentor, right? And to help bring you along. But I have this group of trusted advisors, some peers, some former bosses, some just people who know me personally, who I look to when I need advice. When you're in a leadership role and you're the only one at your organization who does this, it can be hard, right? To bounce ideas off of people and look for direction on what's next. And so I do think having that group of trusted advisors, again, within your industry, outside of your industry, personally, professionally, that you can go to for advice is really, really critical. So I'm happy to have, I would say it's probably at least 10 people that I can go to routinely and just, ask for different advice or pass forward and ultimately bring them back to my own direction and how I want to shape things.
And I'm sure it works both ways, right? Like some
Exactly.
of those 10, they're calling you for your
Exactly.
opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two-way door for sure.
And I think that outside perspective, just like what BetterHelp offers, I think outside perspective, you can get stuck in your personal life and your job and your whatever. And having that outside perspective is always like, it's like the light shining in. And you're like, oh, yeah, I didn't see it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to zoom out.
You got to zoom out. What's something looking back, you might have told your younger self about like a career advice now that you're, seasoned and you've been around and very experienced? What would you tell your younger self about starting in the marketing space?
Two things. One, I used to really have a professional persona and a private persona, right? Like showing up very polished at work, cautious on language, not a lot of like personality. And so I don't think that works, right? I think you have to show up authentically who you are, especially when you're in a leadership position. That's really important, right? Because people want to know that you're not just trying to drive the business outcomes, but why? What's your why? What motivates you? And so I do think I would have told my younger self to lean into that sooner, right? Like just show up authentically as who you are. And don't worry if that's super polished professional or not, right? Might be a bit of my East Coast background, right? Like you sort of are quite professional at work and West Coast is a bit different, but I think I would have changed that. The other thing that I would say is just start. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Like
Yeah.
just get going, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not the exact right timing, even if there are a couple of other headwinds in your way, like just get started. Um, don't wait or don't wait for someone else to sort of say, we need to do this, right? And one of my favorite sayings that I always come back to, old African proverb that's been modernized over the years and is quite galvanizing, I think, which is, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? So just get after it. If you have the intuition, if you have the right experience, you have the right people around you, just get started.
And you think a lot of times we create obstacles so we don't have to start something?
We can overcomplicate everything, right? Just
Yeah.
take it down to the simplicity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What needs to be done? Who do I need to bring in to get it done? What goals do we need to establish?
And I love what you said about, I think that really resonated with me about having a work persona and your actual persona,
Right.
and how when you're starting out or when you're, earlier in your career, you're going to get a lot farther by being yourself. Whether it might not even be the right place that you're at, and you might discover that. But having that, putting on those different masks also gets really tiring.
It absolutely does. And I think there's a layer of appropriate cynicism over someone, right? If you're an overly private person and that's your persona, that's fine, right? But if you're someone who, for me, I'm not overly private. I love to share. I like to be playful. And so for me, not to bring that at work is disingenuous to myself. And so that takes a lot more effort and people can feel that, right? So they have like a healthy and appropriate level of skepticism over who is this person anyway, right? And so I would shed that much faster.
What is something about BetterHelp that you want people to know that maybe they don't know about BetterHelp?
I think when I joined, BetterHelp had a lot of advertisements. So this episode brought to you by BetterHelp, but not as many deep stories, right? Why are we sponsoring this? Who is speaking about mental health? Why is this important for us? Why could BetterHelp be useful for you? And so I want people to know that behind BetterHelp, this advertiser, that there is a group of people building the largest online platform and therapy platform with clinically vetted providers who really care about driving these life-changing outcomes. So it's not just, advertising for the sake of advertising. We're doing this because we believe that we can help people when they need it most. And again, going back to 1 billion people in the world today who are experiencing anxiety or stress and could benefit from therapy, and most of them won't go treat it. So again, I really want to just emphasize the hard work that we're doing to try to normalize therapy and also increase access.
How do you foster mental health within your own teams, your own marketing teams?
Yeah, we are so fortunate on our marketing team. We get to hear these amazing stories from content creators, from podcasters, from customers, from providers. And also that's a lot to take in. And we are doing a lot of really amazing work globally with a very small team. And so we do things that help us connect with each other, right? We're a remote first company. We come together to do what we call wow weeks, where we get together, we do a lot of team bonding activities, we do a lot of hard work, more strategic work that is better suited for in person. So that's one way, right? We really know each other, we connect with each other in this in-person setting, while also allowing for a lot more flexibility with remote work most of the time. So I think that's pretty magical. And there's still a debate, even today, in the end of 2025, about the future of work. Is it remote? Is it in person? And I do think BetterHelp is doing something very unique in this and doing something right. That also reinforces diversity of thought. Where do I have teams sitting? Not everyone is in the Bay Area thinking all tech all the time, right? I have a very diverse group of marketers who, we can help inform each other's lived experiences and ultimately what we're building for our clients and for our providers. So I think that's one piece. Two, we do these refresh days, right? And everybody takes them really seriously. You are offline that day, the entire company. We are taking a refresh day. And I think, again, time off is so important. You need to recharge. And so it's left to you to what you want to do that day.
How often do you guys do that?
We do them about once a quarter.
Okay.
And people take it really seriously. You are not online. You're not working. You're doing something else to refuel you that day. And then people share in Slack what they did, right? It could have been, reading a book for the day. It could have been going to a spa, whatever it is. People choose to do different things to recharge. I think that's pretty powerful for us as well.
Kind of practicing what you preach in that regard. Where do you see BetterHelp in, I don't know, three years?
Yeah. So the largest global online therapy platform, which is what we are today, I would say the global most loved and trusted brand. And that's something that I take really seriously. We have that unique opportunity for people to really not only know about BetterHelp, but love BetterHelp. You mentioned you've used the platform, you had a great experience, right? How do we talk more about that? And how do we build these connections with people that allow them to take the first step to feeling better? And when you feel better, everyone in your life feels better as well, right? So that energy continues rippling out into the world. So I really take that responsibility very, very seriously. And again, every day I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to grow this global brand that has the ability to change people's lives.
How would you describe your leadership style?
I really put a lot of trust in my team. So my goal is to give them as much context as they need to make the right decisions and to empower them to do so, right? I want to give a lot of autonomy. I want to give a lot of responsibility. I also have high expectations, right? So I give that autonomy. I give that flexibility. And when we might get it wrong, because we're going to get it wrong some of the times, I mention it quickly and we always learn from it, right? So I don't get frustrated or upset with the team when we make a mistake. I say, great, let's take this as a learning opportunity. Let's fix it as fast as possible. Then let's take the learnings and let's never make that same mistake again. When we make it twice, that's when I get frustrated. But typically, we don't make it twice.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Sara Brooks, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Great to learn more about your career and great to learn more about BetterHelp and how it's growing and all the good that it's bringing to the world that desperately needs it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Great to meet you. Awesome conversation.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.